Hey guys, this week we are going to be tackling a cube cake. Firstly, you want to choose what size you want your cube. I'm making a 6-inch, so I've cut a 6-inch square from my foam core. You can of course just use a drum, but it's very rare I make square cakes, so I only buy round drums. The great thing about foam core though is that you can cut it to any size and shape you want. This is called a quilting ruler. I use it a lot and it comes in handy for not only the boards but also when you're cutting strips of sugar paste too. Everything I use will be linked in the description box. So we have our 6-inch by 6-inch square, and we also want to make it 6-inch tall to make it a cube. I'm using my trusty Pro Froster. You'll see me use this plenty of times. It's my go-to tool. And this is what's going to give you your straight sides and straight top without needing a spirit level or any sort of ganaching plates or fancy ganache tools. You can see I'm just holding my Pro Froster up to measure it because we want to get that 6-inch tall. I'm just going to jiggle it down a little bit smaller to see how far off we are. Spot on, 6-inch square. This is going to give us a perfect cube. Now, I am a little bit biased with the Pro Froster. It's a tool I designed myself but in metal a few months before this one was released. Rather than continue with it, I just bought this one, which saved me the hassle of trying to create it, and I absolutely love that it works exactly how I thought it would. I love it because of the freedom it gives you for customization. This Pro Froster will do pretty much any size of cube, whereas the ganaching plates, you're going to have to buy them in every single size you want to make, and those fancy ganache sleeves, again you're going to have to buy them in every single size, whereas this you only have to buy it once and it will do multiple. I'm just going to put a little bit of ganache onto the foam core to stick my first cake onto. The aim here is to have your cake centered and have a lip of foam core showing around the edge. This is where your finished ganache layer is going to sit in between, and then continue to fill and stack your cakes as normal. If your cake overhangs, just trim it down a little. Now this is my usual height of cake, 4 layers of cake and 3 layers of filling. But as you can see, we're still a little bit away from the Pro Froster, and it's a bit too much of a gap just to fill with ganache. So I'm going to give my cake a little squash down, which is what's going to happen to it with gravity anyway. We're just speeding it up a little, and I'm going to measure again. I can see I'll just get another slither of cake in there. So I'm just measuring with my Pro Froster again, which is set to 6 inches high, and I'm just a little bit over, but not too much. So again, I'm going to squash it down a little bit and remove any excess filling that starts bulging from the sides, so it doesn't interfere with our ganached finish. I just need a little bit more room for my ganache on the top, so I'm going to trim just a couple of millimeters from the top of the cake. And that's it. I can now run my Pro Froster across the top without it touching, and there's just enough room for a nice layer of ganache to fit. At the same time, you want to make sure that no cake on the sides is touching your Pro Froster, as this will stick out from your ganached finish. So you just want to trim any areas that are getting a little bit too close to it. Then you can go ahead and ganache your cake. The aim here is just to cover all of the open sponge, because that's going to seal all the moisture in and keep your cake fresh. It's also going to firm up your cake so it isn't as jiggly. You just want to make sure that this layer doesn't poke past your foam core, and you can check that by running the Pro Froster around the edges. Here you can see we just caught a little bit sticking out, so what I'm going to do is actually tilt my Pro Froster in at the top to purposely take off more, as you can see here. The reason I'm doing this is because we are already very close on the first pass, and I just want to make sure I've got enough room for my final finish layer of ganache, and that the gravity isn't going to continue to work and push that ganache out a little bit further past my foam core, and we get a little bump in our cube. I'm just tilting the Pro Froster in at the top, so it's taking off a little bit more than's needed, but we're not going back to the bare cake. And then I'm going to let this firm up so that it's far easier to get our second layer on. The aim of this layer is to now fill all that gap between the cake and the foam core. Just keep piling it on and scraping it off. Don't expect this to work first time. You've got to have to do quite a few layers to build it up, but your patience will be worth it. As you can see, we're now starting to close the gap and have it more level with the cake board. You then want to fill any gaps on the top and start scraping in some of those sharp edges. You find the places the hardest will actually be the edges and especially those top corners. Just keep going until you have a pretty good cube shape and then let it set again if needed. Don't try and do it all at once. This is my final layer going on now, and it's a slightly runnier consistency so it runs into the holes and crevices rather than a thicker ganache pulling it straight back out the holes again. We're almost there now. Again, these top corners will be the pesky bits, but you can then switch to a scraper, which will allow you to scrape upwards towards that top corner to get a nice finish. Now you can faff around with this for as long as you like, getting it really nice and perfect. But I know what this cube is going to be used for, and the majority of the corners are actually going to be covered up. So it always pays to think ahead about your final design, and do you really need to go all the way if it's going to be covered up? Now I'm going to stop here because I know it's going to do the job, but like I said, if yours is going to be plain and there's nothing covering it, then just keep going until it's absolute perfection. Your Pro Froster and your scraper will do an amazing job of it, and the great thing about them is that you can make this cube in a 5" or a 5.5" or a 6 3/4, however big you decide to make it, and you only need this one tool. Hope you find this helpful, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Bye guys.